What I'd like you to do before we get started tonight, I would like all of the board, all of the people on the odd side of the board, there's a number on the board if it's odd. Just pull yourself a double run of face cards out of the deck. People on the odd side of the board are going to have a double run of face cards. People on the even side of the board are going to have any old 10 spot, jack preferably, with 3 deuces. Got it. People on the even side of the board are going to have any old 10 card, jack preferably, with 3 deuces.
Okay, I gave you those cards.
Now, have you got those?
Yep.
Now, if you remember on pegging,
On Jim's side, that's the opposite.
I mentioned leading from your strength. Well, I want to demonstrate to you that there's a few, and as a rule, the non-dealer cannot get a triple in back-to-back. As a rule, the non-dealer cannot get a triple in back-to-back, but the dealer can get a triple in back-to-back on any set of 3 cards, including aces through kings. Now, so here's what we got. There are 3 hands, and maybe you can think of some more, but I've thought of 3. I've actually employed 2 of these in play for some very big pegs. If you're the non-dealer and you're needing 9 or 10 pegs, and you're dealt this hand, try the 10-point card first. Try it. Go ahead. Whoever's got the 3 deuces is going to lead. Whoever's got the 3 deuces is going to lead the 10 card. And the other person is going to play on their 10 lead.
22.
You're going to play a deuce now.
Yep.
22, and you're going to get a goal.
Yep.
So you got to get 24 for 2. Remember to take the 2.
I did.
Every week I watch people take 7, 6 and a goal is 7, and not get the 2. It's 9 unanswered pegs. It's beautiful. I made the All-American team. Now, people say, well, it takes a really unusual hand. Well, how unusual is the double run of face cards? Don't you play it damn often? The unusual part is to keep these.
Yeah.
Usually you'd have an ace or a tray or something to go with the deuces. See? So you wouldn't end up keeping the 3 deuces with the 10 most of the time.
3 trays too.
But be aware of it because it works a high percentage of the time. Now this one here, I made the All-American team twice with this one on 4th Street. With 3 3s and a 9, I got 12 going in, and I need 21 to win. Same thing. Works the same way.
Yep.
You play the 9, they go 19, you go 22. Now I'll tell you something else that happened one of the times. The person didn't want to drop their 3 on my 9. You see where I'm coming from? They got like a 9-10 jack with the 3, so they advanced the count. Just exactly the way I wanted, and then they dropped the 3 for 22 because they got a 9.
They play all 3 of them.
And so I get all 4 of them on that one. But that's a little unusual. You can get the 31 for 8 quite often. And if not 8, 7, 30 for 7. This one's a little more unusual with a 9 and the 3 4s, but try it. If you pick up a king 10 and a 9 with 3 4s, you're going to play the 9 with 3 4s. If you pick up maybe even a deuce with a king, you might end up playing the 9 and the 3 4s. So try them, because those 3 all work out the same way, and they're the only hands I know where the non-dealer has a chance to get a triple in back-to-back. And all it takes is a double run of face cards on the other side of the board. and take such an unusual hand at that. Do it. Try it one time. The worst thing that can happen to you when you play the devil on it. 15, you give up 2. Didn't work. Or if you lead the 9, they make 6 on them with 50. Didn't work. But you'll be surprised how often it does when you have those cards. We've got a number of places we want to go tonight. Pegging is a big subject, and it's so important to this game of cribbage. If you think about it, you have a chance to peg every hand. Now, in the average game, you're going to get 4 or 5 chances to peg as a non-dealer, which is maybe 10 pegs if you're a pretty good pegger. 2.0 is a pretty high average for the non-dealers. And you might get to the point where you get 4.0 as the dealer. So you're talking about 9 hands in the average game, 9.1 hands. And the pegging occurs, see, before anything else. I mean, the pegging always counts if the hand is played. The pegging always counts, the crib may not. So the truth is, if you're just kind of an average pegger and just kind of getting them as they show up, you're probably getting 22 to 24 pegs a game, accidentally. They just happen. That's more than you're getting out of your cribs. On average, the crib is 4.8, and you're getting 4 of them on the average game. So they're more, if you get good at pegging, you'll be getting 26 to 32 points per game on pegs, average. And when you get to that point, you won't have to have the superior cards in all the games you play. You will be able to pull some wins out of games in which your cards were inferior. And that's a real challenge in this game, to be able to win a game when your opponent was the one who was getting the cuts. You didn't have much to cut to, and you didn't get much help, but you maximized your cards for the pegging potential. You've got a number of things in front of you tonight, and I'll try to match my points with what you're looking at in terms of paper. Hopefully you all brought some stuff that starts with a 4 in the corner. And there's a few points in each of those papers that's pretty important. I'm going to pull a few items that I think are important out of the paper you have, this 4-7. For a while, Dan Barlow, and I don't know about Dan nowadays, he might be still hanging in there, I don't know. For a while, do you know Dan Barlow? No. Anyway, he was a consultant for Zone. MSN.com had a place called Zone.com, and they had 300,000 rated players. And Dan was an old-timer in the American Cribbage Congress, and he was kind of known as the guru of pegging in the American Cribbage Congress. Well, he makes a number of points in this paper, and I've pulled a few of them here. So important to notice what's on the table. If you see 2 4s and a king on the other side of the board, what should be entering your mind?
Ace.
Most likely an ace. In your hand, you've got a 7 and a 1. Should the 1 be your lead? No, they might have a 7, but less likely they'll have a 7 than a 1. So save that peg, and you get it. If you play the 7, you get the peg, and your opponent doesn't. You get the pair with your ace and the go for 3, whereas if you play the ace, they got 2, and you're going to get a go out of it.
Yeah.
So notice what they are and what the most likely. It's called reading the cards. Reading the cards. Most of the time people keep cards like you would keep them. When you keep 2 4s and a king, what's the most likely card you keep with it? Yeah, and once in a while you might have a 5 with it, but more likely you'd have a 1. The other thing, sometimes people wring their hands and wonder what does their opponent have? You know, that's pretty hard to figure out, even though it's important. We'll get on in another class on something called X-ray vision. where you can develop your vision to actually pretty well identify the kind of a hand that the person is holding after you see the first card. But there is a simpler process. But you have to pay attention. What don't they have? Not what do they have, what don't they have? And a classic example I see all the time is you play a 10-point card, any 10-point card, and your opponent puts a 7 on it.
No 5.
That's what I'd think. So if I had a 9, I'd make the count 26 real quick. That's one thing I think. I mean, people surprise you with some real strange things in this game, but as a rule, if they pass up a 15 on a 10-point lead, it's because they don't have a 5. Most people would love to ditch a 5 and get 15 for doing it. So to make the count 17 and you got a chance to make the count 26, that's a good play. Something else that happened for another reason. If they say go on 26, remember that very clearly. Because I see a lot of games decided where somebody needs 3 pegs, and a 15 doesn't do it. And by holding the 5 back, and nobody, you know, on reneges, there's not 1/3 of them that are ever even recognized because they happened much earlier in the play. It was 26, and I said go. You played a 1 and go. It took a go. And we make another round of play, and all of a sudden you laid out a 10-point card, and I put a 5 on it for 2, and the last card is 3. I needed the extra peg. Most people never noticed that what doesn't he have? Helps you with spotting reneges. If the count is 28, we advance the count to 28 on a couple 10 spots with an 8. So it counts up to 28, and I say go, and my opponent plays the deuce. What do I know about
3?
and no ace? I got 2 crews there. They didn't have a 3, and they didn't have an 8. That's important in the pegging to know that, and it's also maybe important to spot a renege in the next sequence of play. So notice what the count is and what your opponent is, how they're reacting. Are they saying go at a certain point? Important to notice that. It helps on the pegging. It also helps on spotting the reneges. Now, most reneges are totally unintended. There are very few people in this game who renege intentionally. But it happens. And sometimes it affects the outcome of the game. So notice what the count is and what it doesn't seem your opponent has. And if it comes up later, go back to the cards that are laying on the table. It's not that hard to reconstruct it. Go back to the cards that are laying on the table and say, look, the first time through we went like this. It ended on 28 and you said go, and you got a deuce and a 1 in your hand. Okay. See, the cards are on the table. That's one of the reasons it's important to be sure that people don't shuffle the cards around. They are supposed to be laid out as they are played on both sides. That's one of the reasons. If you do have a controversy like that, and reneging often is a controversy because it happened a while before, but I couldn't have noticed it until we got to this point, see? Not something you can just pick up immediately because you don't know that it's happened until later. So, anyway, look for it. I wanted to mention that one. Well, I did mention that when you did that 9 3/4, if you get that one, try it. If you're the non-dealer, try the 9, because if you get a 10 card played on it, you make that first 4 23. And if they got a double run of face cards, I mean, you're home free. Right on out. Remember the 2, the 6 plus the 31. I did want to mention this. This little guy here, that could be with an 8 also. Did you remember, we're going to get into talking about how do I know when to play defense, how do I know when to play offense, how do I know when to play optimally. It comes down to base play on and play off. Come down to playing on or playing off. Now, this 9 deuce 3 4, 8 3 4 5 or 8 deuce 3 4, similar hands to this, with an 8 or a 9. It's worth, if you need pegs, it's worth leading the large card. The large card is the sleeper card. If your opponent has face cards with a 5, which is a very frequent hand, and you lead the large card, you get a count of 19. And you can make it 22. Because you had a 9, 22 is a little better than going to the next count at 23. So 22 is a nice count to make with the 3. And then the 5 goes on that your opponent has. They don't have no choice at 22. If they got a 5, it's got to be played. And the count goes 27, and you say, just like you plan. Well, you don't say, well, I planned it this way, sucker. Yeah, it's all luck. It's all luck, but you can pull this a lot. And this is the kind of a hand to do it with. Because if they got face cards with a 5, this will work a very high percentage of the time. For 31 for 5. And there are very few hands in cribbage that favor the non-dealer in the pegging. So these are some that I've showed you here that if you recognize them when you pick them up, they can put some pretty good scores in your corner. Now, if you were playing defense, you liked where you were on the board. You liked where you were on the board. 5 pegs is not important. Then the 3 lead is the obvious lead because it breaks that 3-card sequence, which defensively is the best thing you can do. And if it gets paired, you can escape with your 9 for 15. So you want to be, you don't play these hands the same way all the time. But you don't just change them because you got a hunch that it won't work this time. You change them only because you've chosen a different strategy. You change the way you play a hand because of your needs on the board. You need pegs, you make the offensive presentation. If you don't need pegs, you play it safe. And you see the difference. We play it safe, we lead the 3. If we want pegs, we need them, we go for them. And we stay after them. We not only go for them with our initial lead, we stay after them. Trying not to let them get away. Good stuff there. Any questions? The other important thing, and this is so for the dealer, the non-dealer usually can't do this. The dealer has a tremendous advantage in pegging in almost all hands. And one thing the dealer should do, and I know some of you are very good at doing this, the dealer often ends up with 2 cards. Make them be scoring cards. If you can't hold a 15 and get 3 for it, hold a pair and get 3 for it. If you can't do that, hold 2 cards of sequence or 2 cards with a gap, like a 4-6. Folks like to hang on to that 5 spot rather than lead it. 4-6 just does magic with the person that hangs on to that 5 spot. They think that only an idiot leads a 5. So they're the idiot that gives up the 5, getting caught with a 4-6 when they could have played it earlier and gave up a 15. There's some very basic things about pegging, and I think anybody who's played the game has probably figured out some of them. One is if the card is less than 5, you can't make a 15 on it. I mean, if you play a 4 and somebody says 15-2, what? Go over that again, would you? How do you get a 15-2 on my 4 spot? I didn't know you could. Well, they might have a long explanation. I don't know. But so that's one of the ideas behind leading a 4 or a 3 if you don't have something else in mind. You're not going to give up 2 points on the opening unless they pair it. And then, of course, you'd like to be having the backup to take 6 on the times they take the pair. I mentioned on this hand here, the deuce 3, 4, 9, if you were playing defense, you would lead the 3. That is true of 3-card sequences in general. Even though, like if you were holding a 6, 7, 8, you would normally lead off the upper end of that, lead the 8. But if you're looking to minimize the damage in the pegging, lead the middle card in the sequence so you don't have 2 cards left that are consecutive. You reduce the chance that your opponent will score a run by pulling the card out of the middle, even though you may be in the habit of leading off the top end. So if they got middle cards and they're dealing, you're going to get burned whichever way you play it. But if they got something other than middle cards, the other thing you do is by leading out of the middle, the 7, you break the 6, 7, which is commonly trapped with the dealers playing face cards and 5s. So see if you can stay away from that. Here's an interesting hand. 1, 7, 8, 9. The 8 is a no. DeLynn says lead the 7. That's true if you're playing defense. You see the difference there? You've got the 1. So you've got, if the dealer pairs your 7, you drop the ace. You get rid of the lone ace for 15. So right now we're even. The dealer's got 2 and we've got 2. Now if you're playing offense with a small card, with middle cards, you lead the small card, whether it's an ace or a deuce. If you're playing, you have a choice then to play runs or pairs. If you're playing offense, if you're playing defense, then look at how it's easiest for you to escape and get out of there. Rattle, who won the national championship one time, great cribbage player from back in Connecticut. If you played a game at his pace, it was done in 6 minutes. And I asked Rit when he won the national championship, I said, what do you attribute your success to this season more than anything else? He said, having the sense to lead a small card from 3 middle cards, 1 or a 2. Actually, it reverses the advantage. If the dealer has middle cards, and you lead from your middle cards, the dealer will almost always outpeg you. I mean, you might get a run of 3, but the dealer will get 4, and usually it goes. So you got 5, and you got a 15 earlier, and the dealer got a 15 plus a run of 4 and a goal, and you got 3. But by leading the small card, you reverse that. You get the final run by leading the 1 or the 2. So if you have that kind of a hand, like it. You see here, that kind of lays it out there how it happened. 7, 15, 22, 31 for 6. This, I got to tell you a game I had. I got to tell you a game I had with George Stanton, who's gone. He used to play up north of here in the Lacey Club. And I had this 1, 6, 8, 9, and led the one. And twice in one game, I got 31 for 6 with the 9. Because the way it works out, you see, with this ace, these are going to total 22. When your opponent slips that 7 in there, the count is 22. So the 9 makes 31 for 6. Try it, you'll like it, but you've got to play the 1 first if you want that to work that way. If the dealer has middle cards and you start with either the 7 or the 8, the dealer will get most of the pegs. We keep talking about this one. I've got it several times in these charts because every week I see this hand which has such great potential. And it works either against the double run or with 1-5, with 1-5 with face cards. Common hand, very common hand, probably 38% of the time somebody's got a double run or 5 with 10-point cards. So if you've got 2 6s, lead it. Even if you've got a poor hand, even if you've got 2 6s and a 4 queen, that's 2 points. But the pegging potential is there. You lead the 6, what happens to the 6? Does the dealer put a 5 on it if they got one?
16.
Yeah, 16. And what do you do with the other 6?
22.
You make 22. Then can the dealer play any 10-point cards at 22? So what does the dealer have to do? He didn't want to give you a 5. He didn't want to play the 5 on your first 6 because that's going to cost him 31 or 15 for 5. So he doesn't put the 5 on your first 6, but he doesn't have any choice on the second one. He's got a 5, it's going to go down for 27 on your 22 play, and your little 4 comes in there for 31 for 5. And maybe you only had 2 6s and a 4 queen, but you maximized the potential of the hand. So when you have these, go for them. Watch for them. Go for them. Now these little guys here work a lot better for the dealer than they do for the non-dealer, but because the dealer can hang on to the small pair. And the dealer very often, if you're dealing, that's one of the arguments. For instance, usually if you would have a hand like this, or maybe like this. There are quite a few of these double runs that we used to recommend that you throw the deuce 3 out. Might be 1, 1, 2, 3, 4 with a king. So you keep the 1, 1, 4 king and put the deuce 3 in your crib. Well, what we're finding with that is that you miss the pegging potential. The double run actually has more pegging potential than does keeping the 1, 1, 4 with the face card and putting the 2, 3 in your crib. So it's true you get a bigger crib, but the difference in the pegging with the double run, as the dealer, the double run is often preferable even though it looks like you ought to put the 2, 3 in the crib. The bigger the small card double run, the better. In other words, 1, 1, 2, 3 is not a particularly good small card double run. The higher the pair gets, the better it is. A 4, 4 for the dealer is almost an automatic 31 for 4. Sometimes the deuce, deuce will do that too. Usually the 3, 3 ends up with a pair for 3. But if you're looking at the total value of the cards, not just the crib value. Sometimes the pegging value will more than offset the loss in the crib. So when we start thinking about the total value of a hand, we're thinking about what are the potential pegs, what is the potential hand score, plus or minus the crib. If it's your crib, it's a plus, and if it's the other person's crib, it's a minus. And so that's a big deal. You'll have to. Get 10 minutes, we'll take a break here. Now, there are some reasonable times to pair the opening lead. It's part of pegging. There are some times when it's reasonably a good thing to do. Oh, one that comes to mind, pretty regular, is you have a 4 spot with a 9. So the lead is a 9. You go ahead and pair it for 18. If the opponent gets 27, you drop the 4 for 31. So you really only gave up 2 pegs. You gave up 6, but you scored 4. So there's some times when you need to look at it that way, that it could be giving up the triple is not really that bad a way to get out of the hand. Might have been the cheapest way that you could have got out was to score 4 pegs and give up 6. You see this happen quite a bit on where, say, a king is paired. I pair the king because I've got an ace. I might pair the queen because I've got an ace. So if I need pegs, the four I get might be more important to my place on the board than the 6 I give you. And that's really an important factor to consider. Sometimes even a pair for you is more important than whether you give up 6. And so you have to be real cautious about where you are on the board, and will 2 pegs be to my benefit? If they will, take them. If it looks like they will. You can't know for certainty at the time how that will affect the game. But if your position is short and it looks like 2 would put you right in there, I'd go for the 2. Go for what you need. Don't wait till the final holes in the game trying to make up ground. The longer you wait, the harder it is. It's much easier to make up ground on 1st and 2nd Street than it is if you wait till the last 15 holes of the game. Nobody wants to give you anything down there. They'll take a chance on giving you some earlier. That's kind of covered in 4-10. I think this is a good time for a break. There's a paper we'll start with called 4-12. It's offensive pegging and defensive pegging. And we'll get into some interesting stuff there. And take about 8 minutes.